Hello, and welcome to episode 21 of Dark Academia Queen. Today, we're going to be talking about the Tasmanian Gothic genre, and this is a genre of Tasmanian literature that merges traditions of Gothic fiction and the history of national features of Tasmania, an island state that is south of the main Australian continent. Now, Tasmanian Gothic has inspired many artistic media, including theater and film. It gets its origins from the 1989 mention article by Jim Davison titled Tasmanian Gothic. And although it deals with themes of horror, mystery, and the uncanny, Tasmanian Gothic literature and art differs from the traditional European Gothic literature, in which is rooted in the medieval imagery, crumbling Gothic architecture, and religious rituals. Instead, the Tasmanian Gothic tradition centers in the natural landscapes of Tasmania and its colonial architecture and history. A densely populated Europe of the Industrial Revolution prompted the Union Gothic literature and novels such as Robert Louis Stevenson's Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mrs. Hyde, personally one of my favorites, and we can still use that case today. Hellstorm actually has a song called Mrs. Hyde that I love, so I would totally recommend going and listening to her. But it's also seen in Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray. But it's sparsely populated, but in sparsely populated Australia, especially in the penal colony of Tasmania, the religious zeal of some prison wardens and the mysterious ritual traditions of Tasmania's indigenous Aboriginal inhabitants tent itself into the entirely different Gothic tradition. The elements of this include or merged with the Aboriginal traditions with the European Gothics and rustic spirits and fairies. Um, Frederick Sennett, in writing in 1856, is considered traditional Gothic Romanticism inappropriate to Australian literature, precisely because the colony lacked the requisite antiquity, and for many, however, the very landscape of Australia was Gothic. This extensive Georgian architecture, including vast abandoned ruins such as Port Arthur's historic site, reputed um, is to be haunted to provide extensive inspiration for contemporary Tasmanian Gothic. I would love to go to Tasmania and see this actually. A new place on my travel bucket list. Um, but in the 19th century, the skulls of Alexander Pierce was held at the State Library in Tennessee, of Tasmania. Now, the dramatic landscape of the impenetrable rainforest of Tasmania and the imagined brutality of the original penal colonies provided a ready source of horror stories, unsettling events in the story of Alexander Pierce, the wandering cannibal who roamed through Van Diemen's Land in 1820, also influenced a bleak and sinister atmosphere that provided an ideal setting for Gothic fiction. Benjamin's through a historical epic painting, the Constellation depicts the signing of the treaty between George Augustus Robinson and the indigenous freedom fighters that provided a foundation for Tasmanian Gothic. Now, the painting also provided the foundation in the later works, including major work of Australian Gothic literature, Marcus Clarke, for the term of his natural life, and it provides a sensationalized account of the convicts unjustly transported to the Diemen's Land of Murder. Is it Demon or Diamond? And it was first published as a novel in 1874, while the notorious prison settlement at Fort Arthur was still in operation. So, when the gold rush switched to focus to the attention of Victoria, Tasmania began to lose its importance. Um, began to lose its importance in the Australian economy. At one as time passed, those who remained on the island became the butt of jokes by mainland Australians, who regarded them as inbred, parochial, and out of touch with civilization. Given Tasmania's relatively tradition have little draw on terms of non-Indigenous stories, while Indigenous history was available for 'em. However, was a mystery and misunderstood enough to draw upon to support the imagery. The Now there were families who still owned the land originally granted by the ancestors in the early years of the 19th century and still live in the houses built by their grandfathers. These families passed the stories of hardship and encounters with Aboriginal people, convict servants, bushfires, floods, and surrounding forests, with cleared for farmland and the intersection of the past and present to inform the island's Gothic character. This is making me want to go so bad to Tasmania and Australia in general. But during the 20th century, a new generation of artists and authors living at the island worked in Tasmania um, it began to explore the Gothic sensibility, drawing up the Tasmanian's colonial and more recent and bizarre people, factual and imagined, creating a uniquely Tasmanian stock of Gothic characters and situations, such as deranged convict escapees, cannibals, corrupt and drunken officials, tough women, troubled and homesick immigrants, malevolent, 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 malevolent forest spirits. I knew I could get that out eventually. Deformed half-wits. Okay, I'm gonna start using half-wits. I actually like that word. I'm gonna start. I have some people I would like to use that on. Feral backwoodsmen set amongst spectacular mountains, remote forest camps, and Tasmania's crumbling penal colony infrastructure. Now, it's the alleged discovery of the degenerate community in the West Coast in the 1930s became the subject of the Golden Age. Now, what are some of the contemporary Tasmanian Gothics? Well, these novelists like Richard Flanagan, Christopher Koch, Chloe Hooper are regarded as a continuation of the Tasmanian Gothic tradition. With Flanagan's 2001 novel, Gold's Book of Fish, winner of the Commonwealth Prize, a fictionalized account of Van Diemen's painter William Bulligold, which focused on his years of imprisonment in the notorious convict settlement of Markery Harbor. According to Caramel Bird, Helen Hodgman's novels distill in the essence of Tasmanian Gothic. Danielle Wood's Tasmanian Gothic novel of the alphabet and the lot of light and dark won the 2002 Australian Vogel Literary Award as well. Roger Scholl's 1988 film, The Tale of Ruby Rose, is about a young woman whose fear of darkness in the Tasmanian Highlands. Julia Lee's 1999 novel, The Hunter, is about a lone man in search for the last Tasmanian tiger. But that is it for this episode. Join me next time as we talk about Latin American Gothic.